Good morning. My name is Aaron Howard. I'm the servant of God and minister for the Church in Tennessee Ministries, and you're watching another episode. Right now we're talking about the church, and we're in the chapter of the chapter of Corinthians, the 6th chapter of Corinthians. I think we're at 6:18 now. I want to thank you guys for joining me. I'm going to get right into the message because I want to hurry up and get through this lesson, this study, and get on to the next one that God has for us. All right. So we were at 6:17. We're at 6:18 now, where it says to flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. All right. Set my timer. So we're at 6:18. Hope you guys have had a great week this week. My week's been okay. It's been productive. Every day above ground preaching the gospel is another productive day. So we're on 6:18, right? So 6:18 says, as I just stated, flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. Flee. Flee. Fornication. All right. Let's even it up. Flee fornication. I'm just going to put it right here. Seems like that's sort of been a theme for Paul. God has Paul speaking out his mouth over the past few verses. Flee. In that verse, he's talking about literal fornication, not spiritual fornication. Literal fornication. He says run from it. Since we are members of Christ's flesh and of his body, and we are one spirit, because we, the church, are joined unto him. Verse 18 says, flee fornication. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body, but he that committeth fornication sinneth against his own body. Now, this word flee, I'm going to probably use more of a board. Put it over there. This word flee is the Greek word fugo. New Testament. Whenever I say Greek, for the most part, I'm going to be speaking of the New Testament, unless I'm referring to the Septuagint, which was the Greek text of the Old Testament for the time then. Fugo. Now, fugo means to run away from. Run away means to flee, means to escape. To elude, to evade. But when we say that, we're speaking metaphorically. We're not literally talking about physically running away from some chick that's after you. That's not what we're talking about. Although you may have to do that, who knows? We're talking about shun. Let's put it up there. Talking about shun fornication. Shun. Avoid. Right? Refuse. Refuse it. Refuse the act. Right? That's what we're talking about. Now, fornication, which we've looked at that word before. It's the Greek word porneia, right? We've looked at that. And we get the word pornography from that. And what is pornography? Pornography is sexually illicit videos That's what it is, basically. All right. Porneia is harlotry. A harlot is a whore. All right, harlotry, including adultery, incest, and figuratively, it's idolatry. And what is idolatry? Idolatry is the act of serving what you see. That's what idolatry is. Give me 1 second. Idolatry is the act of serving what you see. Okay? In the Old Testament, and it also means sexual intercourse. In the Old Testament, whenever you would see God say, you've gone whoring after your images, what he's talking about is you left me and you joined yourself to worshiping sun, moon, stars, trees, animals, or you also worship the host of heaven. You say things like that. You make your images, your Dagon image. Dagon is the fish god. If I'm not mistaken. In fact, take a quick peek real quick. Hold on. Dagon. I'm back to the Iron Age. Yes. I'm not going to discuss that right now. I don't want to get off topic. Dagon was the Canaanite word for fish. Going back to the Iron Age has led to an interpretation as a fish god. Alright? And what are you talking about, fish god? Fish god. This symbol right here. That looks familiar, don't it? Right there. Hope you can see it. Fish god. That symbol looks familiar. Yeah, that was an idolatrous image. Pagan image. That's paganism. Anyway, let's keep moving on. But it literally means illicit sexual intercourse. Unlawful sexual intercourse. All right? Prohibited sexual intercourse. All right? So in verse 13, it says, I'm just going to erase this. I may need the, we're going to leave it up there. In verse 13 of the 6th chapter, it says, the body is not for fornication. Right here in verse 18, he says to flee fornication. To be joined unto a harlot is also to indulge in fornication. There's a point being driven home by Paul. There's a point being driven home by God, because God is using Paul to give this message to us, right? And Paul already gave us the analogy, right? Early on, he was talking about the stomach being for meats and meats for the stomach. God shall destroy both it and them. So the focus that you're putting onto it, onto your stomach and onto fulfilling the desires of the stomach to gratify that, what you see is unnecessary to the point where it's licentious, in other words. That's what Paul was telling them. And so what the Corinthian church was doing, they were making this jump from that analogy. Since the food is for stomach and the stomach is for food, the body is supposed to be for the body. Hey, I can put my body with anybody. The body should be joined to different bodies if we want. And Paul is telling them that thought process, that way of thinking is erroneous, because the body is not for just anybody. Like the body, when we get through, is not for you to use however you want. Doesn't even belong to you. You are a steward over it. All right? So, just as the stomach was and is originally designed and made for foods, so also is the body originally designed and made for the Lord. Now, the body was also designed for reproduction. I do understand that, so I'm not missing out on that point. The body is here also to populate the earth. You also can produce the fruit of your loins, a seed to carry on your namesake or your legacy. But the body is not to be used for sexual misconduct or sexual promiscuity. That's not its purpose. That's not its use. There are a lot of problems that can and often do arise excuse me, from fornication. It's a subject way too vast to discuss right now. All right? The problem concerning fornication that has my focus is that the parties involved are using their bodies against themselves. Whenever we do that, we are sinning against our own bodies. All right? Every sin. All right? We need to understand this concept first. Every sin that a man doeth is without the body. All right. Every pos, it means whole or all. All right. Sin, hamartima, it actually means to miss the mark. The point set for a person to aim at, we're missing it. It has the idea of being at a place where they got a dartboard and you're throwing the darts, but you're missing the mark. The mark actually is the center of the dartboard. That's where you actually should be intending on placing the dart. Now, you may end up close to it, you may end up further away, but the mark or the goal is to hit the center of that dartboard. So when we're committing sin, we're missing the mark. We're missing the aim or the place that God has intended for us to focus and direct our energies toward. All right? Sin. All sin, the whole of sin that men do, mankind, talking about women and men, talking to anybody that can understand me, anybody that has a desire to listen to this to this message. Right? All sin, the whole of it. When we're committing it, right? Every sin, whole or all sin is done without ektos, aside from, beside, external. Without, and then the word body. Whoops. And then the word body is the word soma, and it just means body. Rather abstract a little. So, all sin that mankind is committing is aside from the body. Now, what I'm referencing is the body as the main section of the person, or the body central. The main section right here, the center mass, as we would call it. So what I'm referencing is the body central, the main section of the individual, or the main section of the person, and not the individual limbs. I'm not talking about the limbs. If Paul was referring to the limbs, then that statement would be inaccurate, totally. But he's talking about the body central, right? The body is not the instrument or the tool in committing the violating act. The body is going along for the ride. Whatever's happening, the body is just going along for the ride. All right? That's why Paul says, every sin that a man doeth is without the body. He's really referring to the body central. All right, so the body is not the instrument or the tool committing the violating act. In other words, the body is not being used, every sin except for fornication, the body is not being used to commit the trespass, and therefore is not being used as the agent against itself or into itself. Now, why would I say into itself? Why would I say into itself? That's important. We're going to get to that. All right. However, he that is fornicating, or the person, when I say he, I mean in general. I'm using it as a relative term. He or she, man or woman, teenager, doesn't matter. All right, that doesn't matter. He that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. All right, that's in the Bible. I'm going to force you to go find it. So, he that is fornicating, the individual that is committing porneia, right there, is sinning against or into their own body. Now, this word against is the word ice, and it means to or towards or into or towards. Every sin that a man doeth is away from the body. The body is not the instrument, but he that is committing fornication, the man that is fornicating, the man that is indulging in that activity, the woman that is indulging in that activity is sinning against their own body. All right. Now, fornication requires you take your body and use it in a sexually illicit act into itself, which makes the act against itself, because you're defiling the inner and the outer man. Inner man, who you are to yourself. Outer man, who you are to the world. The inner man, the man that can reflect essentially the suke man, the mind. Fornication and the body. even on. All right. So what happens is the inner and the outer man, they concur with one another. They walk in an agreement. And we're not talking about the person that you're doing it with. Just talking about you, the individual. Whenever I did it, I was walking in an agreement, mind and body. Every other sin except this one is external to the body. But fornication is a sin that penetrates the soul. It's a sin that penetrates the soul. So the inner and the outer man are walking in an agreement that violates the nature or the entire constitution of the individual. Sinning against your own self. You're sinning into yourself. You're walking counter to the body's purpose, the body's overall purpose. Its aim that God has set, that God has set for man, that God has set for you. If you're the church, if you're a believer, God has called you to so much more. The statutes and precepts. The statutes and precepts that we've been given is our wisdom. These words are our wisdom. They come straight from the Lord above, from our Creator. When we fornicate, not only are we violating the law of nature, our law of nature, because that law is set by God. Did He not create all things, and were not all things created to and for Him? In Revelation, the 4th chapter, there's many verses that tell us this. So not only are we violating the law of nature that has been set by Him, the nature of our Constitution we're violating, mind and body, spirit and body. So we're violating the interior, internally, our essence, our whole Constitution is being violated by this act. And when I say that, I'm not referring to marriage as the ceremonial act. That's not what I'm talking about here. That's not what this is about. This is talking about people in a monogamous heterosexual relationship. One man for one woman. When that relationship is violated, then you're also violating you entirely. It's like going to take poison. It's like building a house, and while you're building one side of it, you go to the other side of it, take some gasoline and set it on fire, and then you go back over to the other side of it and start building again. This side's on fire, this side you're building up, and you're working counter to or contrary to your overall aim or goal of building the house. And when we get to our next verse, that's what we're the temple of God. You're setting you're essentially building the temple and setting it on fire when you commit fornication. That would be a proper example. So that's all for today. We'll come back next week and we'll get right to the verse, the main verse that I mean to come to, which is that our body is the temple of God. Thank you guys for joining me. Please go out, have a safe day, be blessed. May the day be great for you. No matter what may no matter what may occur in your day. Paul said he learned to be content no matter what situation he was in. Likewise, we have to learn to be content no matter what situation we're in. Let us continue to praise God in our work, in our minds, in our bodies, in our activities, in righteousness. Be blessed. Thank you.